Maybe the pleasure wasn't deep enough. Maybe the upgrade was too small. Maybe you need a better plan, a bigger win, a more interesting life. So you keep moving, because standing still long enough to examine desire feels strangely dangerous. What if you discover that the thing driving you isn't ambition at all, but discomfort wearing ambition's clothes? Late at night, this becomes harder to ignore. The house is quiet. You've eaten, you're warm. Nothing is urgently wrong. Yet your hand still reaches for the phone, looking for one more message, one more video, one more tiny change in feeling. We say we're relaxing, but often we're searching. And if enough never feels like enough, pleasure starts to look less like freedom and more like a very polite form of dependence. This is where Epicurus becomes useful. He wasn't preaching endless indulgence, despite what his name now suggests. He treated pleasure as a test. Some desires remove real pain, some add warmth, friendship, safety, or ease. Others create the itch they promise to scratch. They make us work, compare, spend, impress, and worry, then call the brief relief happiness. So how do you tell the difference between a pleasure that nourishes your life and one that quietly takes control of it? And what happens when the simplest pleasures turn out to be stronger than the ones that demand the most from you? Epicurus offers a way to examine desire without pretending you should have none. You don't need to renounce comfort, success, good food, or the small thrill of getting what you wanted. You need to notice what each desire does after it's satisfied. Does it leave you settled, or does it immediately send you back to the hunt? If you enjoy thinking through questions like this with me, subscribing helps others find them too. Liking and sharing the video helps even more. Now, let's begin. You finally get the thing you wanted, and for a moment, life becomes wonderfully simple. The food arrives, the message comes back, the payment clears, the room is quiet. You feel a small release, as if some private argument has just been settled. Then the feeling slips. Nothing dramatic happens. The meal was good, the purchase works. The person you wanted to hear from really did answer. Yet somehow your mind is already leaning forward again. Maybe you check the phone once more. Maybe you start thinking about what you should buy next, fix next, achieve next. Satisfaction barely sits down before wanting takes its chair back. We often read this as evidence that we chose badly. The pleasure wasn't strong enough. The reward wasn't quite right. So we adjust the target. A better restaurant, a larger number, more attention from the same person, or attention from someone harder to impress. We assume the answer to restless desire is a more convincing pleasure. But pleasure can be completely real and still fail to settle us. That's the awkward part. You can enjoy what happened without becoming less hungry for the next thing. The problem isn't that nothing feels good. Plenty of things feel good. The problem is that feeling good and feeling satisfied aren't always the same experience. One gives you a pleasant moment. The other changes your relation to wanting. It leaves some quiet behind when the moment ends. You don't have to grip the pleasure, repeat it immediately, or start negotiating for a better version. For a while, nothing is missing. You can see the difference late at night. You finish an episode you liked. Then let the next one begin because stopping feels strangely empty. You scroll past things that genuinely amuse you, yet your thumb keeps moving. Each small pleasure works. None of them tells the search to end. 10 minutes later, you're still there, mildly entertained, and somehow no more at rest. It's like drinking from a glass with no bottom. The water isn't fake, but the act of drinking never reaches completion. This is why a comfortable life can still feel crowded with appetite. We may have more ways to please ourselves than any previous generation, while remaining oddly unpracticed at being settled by pleasure. We know how to produce the spark. We don't always know how to let it become enough. And if every pleasure quietly sends us looking for another, what exactly are we trying to satisfy? The trouble starts with the word pleasure. We use it for almost any experience that feels good. A sweet taste, a warm bath, a compliment, a purchase, a burst of relief. So when Epicurus says pleasure is the goal of life, it's easy to hear something rather shallow. Enjoy yourself. Collect agreeable moments. Keep the good feelings coming. But he's asking a much harder question. He isn't only asking whether this moment feels pleasant. He's asking whether the way you pursue pleasure leaves your life calmer, freer, and less ruled by need. The same word is doing two different jobs. It can describe a flash of enjoyment, or it can serve as a criterion for judging a whole life. That distinction changes everything. A choice can feel good now while making tomorrow more anxious. Another can involve discomfort now while protecting your peace later. Epicurus isn't embarrassed by ordinary enjoyment, and he doesn't ask us to become suspicious of every good meal or easy afternoon. He simply refuses to judge a pleasure in isolation. He looks at what comes with it, what follows it, and what kind of person must be maintained to keep getting it. Suppose you want the pleasure of being admired. The praise itself may be genuine, yet if enjoying it requires constant comparison, careful self-display, and fear of being forgotten, the pleasure arrives carrying a private workload. You don't merely receive admiration, you have to manage the conditions that produce it. A pleasant feeling has become an expensive arrangement. This is why Epicurus can sound like a champion of pleasure while recommending restraint. He isn't switching sides, he's following pleasure beyond its first impression. Some enjoyments settle us, others enlarge the appetite they promise to satisfy. Some leave you untroubled, others recruit the future into paying for the present. So the question is no longer, did I enjoy that? You probably did. The question is what place that enjoyment occupies in the shape of your life. Does it make enough feel possible, or does it train you to experience enough as deprivation? Epicurus uses a familiar word, then quietly raises the standard. Pleasure isn't merely whatever feels good while it's happening. It's also the measure by which we ask whether our pattern of wanting is giving us a life we can actually inhabit in peace. A pleasure earns our trust by what it does to our peace. Not only while we have it, but later, when it's gone, delayed, threatened, or sitting just beyond reach. Does it leave us steadier, or does it make ordinary life easier to interrupt? That correction counts because pleasure can feel generous while quietly making demands. The first drink may soften the evening, but if every difficult evening soon seems unbearable without it, the pleasure has created a new point of disturbance. Praise can lift you. Yet if one cool response ruins your day, the praise has also taught your peace to depend on other people's temperature. Even a harmless purchase can become strangely expensive when anticipation turns into checking, comparing, refreshing, and the small misery of watching someone else receive theirs first. Epicurus asks us to judge the whole movement. A trustworthy pleasure reduces agitation without leaving a larger hunger in its place. It doesn't need to make you invulnerable. Nothing does. It simply shouldn't keep adding handles by which the world can grab you. This can sound severe until you notice how practical it is. We already know the difference in our bodies. Some pleasures finish cleanly. A meal ends and you feel fed. A conversation ends and the silence afterward is still friendly. You put the book down without resentment. Other pleasures refuse to conclude. They leave an itch. You reach for the phone again before you've even decided to. You replay the compliment, then search for another. You get what you wanted and immediately become anxious about keeping it. The issue isn't intensity. A quiet pleasure can make you dependent, and a powerful pleasure can leave you calm. The useful test is disturbance. How much inner noise did this pleasure relieve? How much did it produce? What does its absence now do to you? That gives us a more honest way to look at our habits. We don't have to condemn them, and we don't have to defend them just because they're enjoyable. We can watch what follows. After the pleasure passes, are you returned to your life with less friction? Or has your life begun to feel like the annoying interval before you can have it again? Try that test on one pleasure you repeat almost automatically. Don't ask whether it's good or bad. Ask what kind of person it is training you to become when the pleasure isn't available. Someone who can remain at ease, or someone increasingly easy to disturb. That test can sound strangely modest. We're used to thinking that a philosophy of life should demand something grand from us, a mission, a sacrifice, a reason to wake before dawn and become impressive. Epicurus begins somewhere less dramatic. He asks what all our choosing is already trying to reach. We pursue one thing and avoid another, because we expect the choice to improve how life feels. Even when we accept pain, we usually accept it for some later relief or satisfaction. You endure the awkward conversation because honesty may bring peace. You train until your muscles ache because strength gives you freedom. You turn down an easy comfort because you know the bill will arrive tomorrow. Beneath these different choices sits a simple aim. We want a life that feels good to live. Epicurus calls that aim pleasure, and this is where 2,000 years of misunderstanding can enter through one small word. Pleasure here doesn't mean obeying every appetite. It doesn't mean making the evening louder, the meal richer, or the sensation more intense. If an appetite leaves you more anxious, dependent, or difficult to satisfy, then following it may increase pleasure for an hour while making a pleasant life harder to reach. The goal isn't to collect enjoyable moments as quickly as possible. The goal is pleasure as the end of our choices, the condition those choices are meant to serve. End means purpose, as when we ask what an action is for. Money is useful because of what it lets you do. Status counts, if it counts at all, because of how you imagine it will make you feel among other people. Even ambition usually points beyond itself. You don't want the promotion as a new arrangement of words in an email signature. You want the security, respect, freedom, or satisfaction you think will come with it. Epicurus keeps following those desires until they stop pointing elsewhere. Pleasure doesn't need another reason. If you ask why you want freedom from fear, or why you want to enjoy the company of someone you love, eventually the answer is simply that this is a good way to be alive. That makes pleasure the standard, but not every pleasure the command. A pleasant life may require refusing a pleasure, accepting a pain, or letting an appetite complain without treating it like an emergency. Epicurus isn't handing desire the keys. He's giving judgment a destination. Choose by the life a pleasure creates instead of the feeling it offers now. You already make this kind of judgment, though usually after the damage is done. The second drink tastes good. The 6th episode is easier than going to bed. Sending the message gives you 10 seconds of relief. Then morning arrives, carrying the rest of the bill. Epicurus asks you to include that morning in the original choice. A pleasure isn't confined to the moment when it feels pleasant. Its anticipation may tighten your whole day around it. Its aftermath may leave you restless, embarrassed, indebted, exhausted, or hungry for another round. All of that belongs to the experience you're choosing. This makes his view far more demanding than simple indulgence. Imagine 2 dinners. One is expensive, excessive, and spent worrying about how much it costs. You look forward to it all week, but the anticipation becomes a kind of pressure. During the meal, you're already trying to make it feel worth the money. Afterwards, you feel heavy and vaguely disappointed. The other dinner is ordinary food with someone whose company lets you relax. There's little anxiety before it, no performance during it, and no regret afterwards. The pleasure continues as memory because nothing in it needs to be defended. By Epicurean standards, the quieter evening may contain more pleasure across the whole stretch of your life. Memory counts because yesterday doesn't simply disappear. A good experience can remain available to you long after the sensation ends. Epicurus himself drew on memories of conversations with friends while living through severe physical pain. He wasn't pretending that memory erased the pain. He was showing that a life contains more than whatever sensation happens to be loudest right now. Anticipation works the same way in the other direction. Looking forward to something can enlarge a pleasure, but wanting can also occupy you so completely that the promised reward starts disturbing the life it was supposed to improve. You know the feeling. Checking the delivery status, watching the clock, rehearsing the conversation, refreshing the screen. The object hasn't arrived, yet it already owns the room. So the useful measure is wider than, will this feel good? Ask what kind of waiting comes with it. Ask what remains when it's over. Some pleasures begin charging interest before you receive them. Others leave behind steadiness, affection, confidence, or a memory that still warms an otherwise difficult day. The moment counts. It just doesn't get to hide its consequences. When anticipation and aftermath enter the account, pleasure becomes less like grabbing a reward and more like choosing which experiences deserve space in your life. This is where thought earns its place. We sometimes treat reflection as the enemy of pleasure, as if examining joy too closely will drain the colour from it. The spontaneous person says yes, the cautious person ruins the mood. It's a familiar little argument, and Epicurus refuses both roles. For him, thought isn't there to put pleasure on trial. It protects pleasure from its own impostors. Some desires arrive wearing the face of freedom, while quietly making us dependent. They promise relief, then teach us that relief can only come through another purchase, another victory, another person's approval. The pleasant feeling may be real. The trap is real too. This doesn't mean living with a suspicious mind, hovering over every good moment with a clipboard. Nobody wants to turn dinner with friends into an audit. Epicurean reflection is much simpler. It asks whether a pleasure can belong to your life without taking command of it. Can you enjoy it without needing it to rescue your mood, prove your worth, or silence every uncomfortable feeling? That small pause changes the role of reason. Reason isn't the stern adult dragging you away from the party. It's the friend who notices when the party has stopped being fun and you're staying because leaving would feel like defeat. It helps you tell the difference between delight and compulsion, between wanting something and handing it authority over you. Durable joy needs that protection because desire is persuasive. It speaks in the voice of urgency. Buy this now. Answer immediately. Win this argument. Make them understand. Each command feels uniquely important while it's happening. Thought restores proportion. It lets the desire become one feeling among many, rather than the ruler of the evening. And this is why Epicurean pleasure is neither indulgence nor grim restraint. It's intelligent enjoyment. You're allowed to love taste, touch, laughter, beauty, rest, and celebration. You're also allowed to notice when the pursuit of a good feeling has started shrinking the life around it. Care for pleasure sometimes means refusing what would corrupt it. But once thought begins sorting our pleasures, it meets a harder problem. Many desires don't feel chosen at all. They arrive already loaded with status, fear, habit, and the expectations of other people. Protecting joy, then, requires more than choosing carefully in the moment. We have to understand who taught us what to want. A second helping can be delicious and still be a bad idea. So can another drink, another purchase, another hour spent scrolling in bed. The sweetness isn't fake. That's what makes the choice difficult. We're often tempted to defend a pleasure by pointing to the fact that it feels good, as though the feeling settles the matter. Epicurus refuses that shortcut. In his letter to Meneisis, he says plainly that we don't choose every pleasure. Some pleasures bring disturbances greater than the enjoyment they offer, and some pains are worth accepting because a greater pleasure follows from them. That sounds almost obvious until it reaches something you want right now. Then your mind becomes a gifted lawyer. It calls the impulse a reward. It says you deserve it. It insists that tomorrow's cost belongs to tomorrow's version of you, who is apparently a separate employee hired to handle complaints. Epicurus asks us to join those two people back together. The person enjoying the pleasure and the person living with its effects are both you. This doesn't make immediate enjoyment suspicious. It makes consequence part of the experience. The late-night argument isn't separate from the satisfaction of sending the message. The restless morning isn't unrelated to the extra drinks. The anxiety after spending belongs in the same account as the thrill at the checkout. He applies the same judgment in the other direction. A difficult conversation may hurt and still free you from weeks of tension. Exercise can be uncomfortable and leave you more at ease in your body. Turning down an invitation may feel awkward and preserve the quiet you badly need. Pain doesn't automatically make a choice wrong, just as pleasure doesn't automatically make it wise. This is less like following a moral rule and more like learning the shape of your own reactions. You notice which pleasures settle naturally and which ones keep demanding payment. You notice which discomforts merely wound you and which ones clear away a larger strain. The decision depends on what follows, not on whether the first sensation arrives wearing a smile. So Epicurus is not handing desire a crown, he is giving judgment a job. A pleasure remains something to welcome, sometimes fully and without apology. But the fact that something is pleasant is the beginning of the decision, not the end of it. You already know this in ordinary life. You sit through an awkward conversation because avoiding it has made the whole house tense. You go to the dentist because one unpleasant hour may prevent months of pain. You turn down another drink because tomorrow belongs to you as well. None of this makes discomfort good in itself. It means a brief pain can sometimes protect a wider peace. That distinction is important for Epicurus. He doesn't praise suffering, and he doesn't think pain builds character simply because it hurts. Pain is still something we naturally want to escape. But if escaping it now creates more fear, dependence, illness, or turmoil later, then immediate relief has become expensive. The calm of your life may depend on accepting the smaller cost. Think of someone who needs to tell a friend the truth. Silence feels easier tonight. The conversation may bring embarrassment, anger, or the risk of being misunderstood. Yet, continued silence has its own weight. Every meeting becomes strained, every message needs careful wording. Your mind keeps rehearsing what you refuse to say. A painful conversation could disturb one evening, while ending a private tension that has occupied weeks. The same logic applies to desire. Suppose you've become used to buying something whenever you feel low. Resisting the urge is uncomfortable because the habit has linked relief with spending. Giving in removes the discomfort for a moment, then leaves less money, more worry, and a stronger habit waiting for the next bad day. The chosen pain of saying no isn't a performance of willpower. It's a way of refusing a larger disturbance. Epicurean peace, therefore, has a time horizon. It asks you to feel the present honestly without letting the present make every decision. A whole life can't be judged one sensation at a time. We live through consequences, memories, habits, and expectations. What you choose today can make tomorrow quieter or teach tomorrow to demand more. There is also a limit here. Not every hardship deserves acceptance. Pain that protects nothing, prevents nothing, and serves no lasting calm doesn't become noble under an Epicurean label. Endurance isn't automatically wisdom. The point is to compare outcomes without romanticizing the cost. So the distinction is precise. Pain may be worth choosing, but it never becomes the goal. It is acceptable only as an instrument, and only when it guards something larger than the moment, the steadiness of a life no longer being pulled apart by every immediate urge. That immediate urge can feel remarkably honest. Your hand reaches for the phone before you've formed a thought. You want the message, the purchase, the praise, the second helping. The feeling arrives with such force that it seems to carry its own proof. Surely anything this strong must be telling you something important. But intensity only tells you how loudly a desire is speaking. It doesn't tell you whether the desire deserves your trust. Some desires settle when they're answered. They ask for something real, receive enough, and become quiet. Hunger works this way when food is available. So can the wish for rest, safety, friendship, or a place where you don't have to perform. Their limits may not always be neat, but they have limits. Satisfaction is possible. Other desires behave differently. Giving them what they want doesn't complete them, it trains them. One compliment makes the next silence harder to bear. One upgrade makes the current version feel embarrassing. One small victory moves the standard for what counts as enough. You can spend years obeying such a desire without ever reaching the moment when it releases you. This is why a desire's strength can't be the only measure of its authority. We also have to look at its structure. Does fulfilling it create steadiness or greater dependence? Can it recognize enough, or does it survive by moving enough farther away? Does it answer a need, or keep inventing a new emergency? That distinction changes the way we understand self-control. You're not simply trying to become stronger than your desires, as if your mind were a guard wrestling a crowd at the gate. You're learning which voices become more reasonable when heard, and which become more demanding when obeyed. The loudest one may be the least capable of guiding a life. This can be awkward because modern life is very good at presenting expandable wants as personal necessities. A quieter phone, a less impressive wardrobe, an evening nobody sees. These can feel like evidence that you're falling behind. Yet the discomfort may belong less to deprivation than to a desire that has forgotten how to stop. Epicurus gives us a way to judge that confusion without treating every want as shameful. Desire isn't the enemy. The problem is granting equal credibility to desires built in radically different ways. Some point toward a need that can be met. Some attach themselves to useful things but exaggerate the amount required. And some offer no stable finish at all. So the next distinction isn't between wanting and refusing to want. It's between desires that can live peacefully inside a human life and desires that quietly demand the whole thing. Think about 3 desires that can arrive before lunch. You're hungry and want something to eat. You'd rather have a good meal than a plain one. Then you see someone your age buying a house, and suddenly you want enough money to never feel behind again. All 3 feel like desire, but they don't behave the same way. Epicurus sorts them into 3 groups. The first are natural and necessary desires. Food when you're hungry, water when you're thirsty, sleep, shelter, safety, and the basic comfort of human connection. They come from the kind of creature you are, and ignoring them brings real pain. More importantly, they have a limit. Hunger can be satisfied. Thirst can end. The body eventually says, enough. The second group is natural but unnecessary. You need food, but you don't need this particular restaurant. You need somewhere to sleep, but not the most impressive room. You want company, but perhaps you also want the perfect dinner, the expensive wine, and everyone in exactly the right mood. These desires aren't automatically foolish. Epicurus enjoyed friendship and simple pleasures. The risk begins when an improvement becomes a requirement. A nicer meal is pleasant until plain food starts to feel like failure. And then there are desires that are neither natural nor necessary. Endless wealth, public admiration, status that no one can challenge, the fantasy of becoming so successful, attractive, or important that insecurity finally loses your address. Epicurus treats these desires with special suspicion because they don't contain their own stopping point. How much praise proves you matter? How much money makes comparison impossible? There's always another person ahead, another number to reach, another room where your name isn't known. This isn't a command to live without comfort, ambition, or nice things. It's a map of risk. Natural and necessary desires are usually limited and easier to satisfy. Natural but unnecessary desires can enrich life, though they can also train us to need luxury. Empty desires are the most dangerous because their limit is borrowed from other people. You stop only when the comparison stops, and comparison rarely volunteers. So when a desire takes hold, Epicurus gives you a cleaner way to read it. Is this a basic need asking to be met? Is it a natural pleasure asking for a more elaborate version? Or is it a desire with no finish line, quietly asking the world to confirm that you're finally enough? The trouble is that an empty desire rarely feels empty. It can feel urgent, personal, almost physical. You see someone announce a promotion while you're eating breakfast, and suddenly your perfectly decent job feels like a room with no air. Nothing in your actual life changed. The coffee is still warm, the rent is still paid. Yet the desire to be further ahead has become vivid enough to pass for a need. That's why naturalness can't be measured by emotional intensity. A desire may keep you awake and still have very little to do with what your life requires. Another may arrive quietly, without drama, and point towards something basic: food, rest, safety, affection, company. The loudest desire in the room isn't automatically the most important one. Modern life makes this distinction harder because we're surrounded by machines for making fantasy feel immediate. A watch advertisement doesn't sell you a way to know the time. It gives you a small film about control, taste, and being the sort of person whose arrival carries weight. A larger house stops being extra space and becomes proof that your life is moving forward. Even a holiday can become less about rest than producing evidence that you know how to live. None of this means the watch, the house, or the holiday is bad. Epicurus isn't hiding behind the sofa, waiting to confiscate your nice things. The useful question is what job you've given them. A pleasure can stay a pleasure. Trouble begins when it has to repair your status, settle your identity, or silence the fear that someone else is winning. You can often feel the difference after the object arrives. A natural desire tends to soften when it's satisfied. Hunger eases, fatigue releases its grip. The conversation with a friend leaves you steadier. Empty desire often survives its own success. You get the title, then notice the person with the better title. You buy the thing, then start watching whether anyone notices. Satisfaction appears briefly, followed by maintenance. So vividness tells you how strongly a desire is being felt, not where it came from or whether it has a limit. That distinction counts because fantasy can imitate necessity with great skill. It can make applause feel like oxygen and comparison feel like hunger. The feeling is real. The need it claims to represent may not be. That's why an empty want can be surprisingly hard to dismiss. It rarely introduces itself as vanity. It says, "Once I have enough money, I'll be safe." Or, "Once people respect me, I'll know I'm not wasting my life." The object may be a larger house, a promotion, a certain kind of body, or a number in an account. But the emotional weight often comes from something far more basic, the wish to feel secure and the wish to feel worthy. There's nothing foolish about wanting security. You need shelter, stability, and some protection from chaos. The trouble begins when your mind asks a thing with no fixed limit to provide a feeling that can never be permanently guaranteed. How much money would make you safe from every possible loss? How much praise would settle your value beyond all doubt? There is no final number, so the desire keeps moving the finish line while presenting each new target as the last sensible one. You can see this on an ordinary evening. You check your bank balance, and for a moment you feel relieved. Then you imagine an illness, a job loss, a bad year. The same balance suddenly looks inadequate. Or someone compliments your work. It feels good until you notice they praised someone else more warmly. Nothing material changed in those few minutes. The want simply found a fresh threat to justify its return. Epicurus understood that some desires grow through belief rather than bodily need. We don't merely want the object, we give it a job, protect me from uncertainty, prove I matter, stop other people from looking down on me. Once the object carries that burden, enough becomes almost impossible. A house can keep out rain. It cannot settle your rank among every person you might compare yourself with. Money can solve many real problems. It cannot purchase exemption from chance. Recognition can open doors. It cannot issue a permanent verdict on your worth. This is why telling yourself to be less materialistic often misses the point. You may not be chasing luxury at all. You may be trying to build emotional shelter out of achievements, possessions, and other people's reactions. From the outside, it looks like ambition. From the inside, it can feel like responsible self-protection. And because safety and self-worth matter so much, the pursuit acquires moral seriousness. Slowing down feels careless. Being satisfied feels like losing your edge. Someone else's success can register as evidence against your own life. The desire no longer says, "I'd enjoy more." It says, "Without more, something is wrong with me." That claim can survive almost any success, because every achievement becomes another thing you're now afraid to lose. That's why the finish line keeps moving. You reach the number, earn the title, buy the thing, or finally receive the approval you wanted. For a moment, the pressure drops. Then your mind looks sideways. Who has more? Who got there younger? Who seems happier with less effort? The achievement still exists, but it no longer proves what you needed it to prove. Some desires have a natural stopping point. Hunger can be satisfied. A room can become warm enough. You can get the rest your body was asking for. But comparative proof has no natural limit, and there's no final amount of status that makes comparison impossible, because status only means something in relation to someone else. The object isn't really the promotion, the house, or the praise. The object is the feeling of being securely ahead. And ahead is a remarkably unstable place to live. The moment you arrive, the comparison group changes. You stop measuring yourself against the people you once hoped to join, and start measuring yourself against the people already above you. A better salary introduces you to larger salaries. Greater skill makes you more aware of exceptional skill. Recognition places you among people receiving even more recognition. Success doesn't end the comparison. It upgrades the competition. This can make an outwardly successful life feel strangely deprived. Nothing is missing in the ordinary sense. The bills are paid, the work is respected, the phone contains messages from people who care about you. Yet one colleague's announcement can drain the colour from the whole evening. You were content at 6 o'clock. By 6:15, someone else's good news has turned your life into insufficient evidence. The awkward part is that the desire can't admit what it wants. If you say, "I want enough money to live comfortably," enough can be discussed. It can even be reached. If the hidden wish is, "I want enough money that nobody can make me feel lesser," no figure can settle it. There will always be another room, another person, another standard. Even winning only provides temporary relief, because the proof must be renewed. So each satisfaction creates a fresh lack. The new possession needs a more impressive setting. The promotion needs another promotion to confirm it wasn't luck. Praise needs to be repeated before silence begins to feel like decline. You aren't failing to enjoy what you have. You're asking what you have to perform a job it cannot do. Turn a relative advantage into permanent self-worth. That is the mechanism of endless desire. The reward fades because the real object was never obtained. Comparative proof cannot be possessed. It has to be produced again every time the room changes. Comparison does something more unsettling than making you want extra things. It changes what the things are for. A home can shelter you, give you privacy, hold the people you love. But once it enters a social ranking, those uses become almost secondary. Now the home is also evidence. Its size, address, furniture, and view are asked to say where you stand. That shift can happen almost invisibly. You buy a coat because it's warm and fits well. Then you notice the label on someone else's coat. You see how people respond to it. Suddenly, warmth is no longer the whole test. The coat has been pulled into a contest, and the pleasure it gives you now depends partly on who is standing nearby. The object hasn't changed, the measurement has. This is why comparison disturbs pleasures that seemed perfectly stable. Food can taste good, a holiday can be restful, work can be satisfying. But social measurement adds another question. How does mine compare? And once that question takes over, direct enjoyment becomes oddly difficult. You're no longer only having the experience, you're watching yourself have it from an imagined seat in the crowd. A quiet weekend may have been exactly what you needed. Then you open your phone and see a friend on a bright coast, drinking something expensive beside water so blue it looks professionally managed. Nothing has been taken from your weekend. The room is still comfortable. The tea still tastes the same. Yet the pleasure contracts because its purpose has changed. It must now defend your position. That's a brutal assignment for any ordinary pleasure. Use has a natural measure. The coat is warm enough, the meal is filling, the room is peaceful. Rank has no such stable measure because it belongs to the group, and the group keeps moving. New people appear, signals lose their force. Yesterday's luxury becomes today's expectation, then tomorrow's slightly embarrassing basic package. We often call this envy, and sometimes it is. But envy makes it sound like a private flaw, as if you merely need to become more grateful. The mechanism is broader. Comparison turns goods into public scores, then asks your nervous system to treat every score change as news about your worth. You can feel the exposure in small moments, the hesitation before mentioning your job, the urge to explain why your car is old, the relief when someone impressive approves of your taste. These reactions reveal what social measurement has quietly done. You thought you were choosing what would make life pleasant. Somewhere along the way, you began choosing what would make your place legible. And once your place has to remain legible, there is no obvious point at which you can relax. A number can always rise, a room can always be larger, someone can always arrive with better news, better clothes, a better story about what they're doing with their life. Even success becomes oddly unstable. You get the thing, enjoy the lift, and then discover that the finish line was painted on wheels. This is why more works so poorly as a cure. The problem isn't simply that we're greedy or ungrateful. It's that more contains no instruction for when to stop. If the desire has no natural limit, satisfying it only creates a new position from which to desire again. You can feed it for years without ever giving it what it supposedly wanted, because it never asked for a particular amount. It asked to remain ahead, admired, safe from embarrassment. Those conditions can't be secured once and for all. Epicurus drew a sharp distinction here. Some desires come with an answer built into them. Hunger can be satisfied, thirst can be quenched. The body asks for shelter, rest, friendship, and freedom from immediate fear. These needs may not always be easy to meet, but they have a shape. You can recognize enough. Other desires are different. Fame has no final portion. Status has no full stomach. Wealth, when pursued as protection from every possible future, can't tell you when the protection is complete. The desire keeps speaking because nothing in its design allows silence. That doesn't make comfort, ambition, or money shameful. Epicurus wasn't asking us to make a moral performance out of having less. He was asking a more practical question. Can this desire actually finish? If it can't, then treating its fulfillment as the price of peace gives it permanent control over your life. You can see the absurdity in an ordinary upgrade. The new phone is delightful until it becomes your phone. The promotion feels decisive until it becomes your job. The impressive home eventually contains laundry, crumbs, and the same mind that wanted an impressive home. A life absorbs the prize, then carries on. A limit doesn't shrink life. It gives satisfaction somewhere to land. Without one, every gain becomes evidence that another gain might finally do the job. With one, we can begin separating what supports a good life from what merely keeps desire employed. And that leaves a harder problem. If enough isn't dictated by the crowd, we have to learn how to recognize it for ourselves. You can often recognize enough by what happens after you get it. Your body unclenches. Your mind stops bargaining. You're no longer reaching past the moment for something that might improve it. Nothing unusual has happened. The room is still the room. Your life hasn't suddenly become impressive. But for a while, there's no argument between where you are and where you think you should be. We tend to miss this kind of pleasure because it doesn't announce itself. Stimulation is easier to notice. A delicious meal, good news, a purchase arriving at the door. These produce a clear rise, something enters, and your mood changes. So we learn to measure pleasure by intensity. More excitement must mean more pleasure. Less excitement must mean we're missing out. But intensity is only one kind of experience, and it's a restless one. A peak feels like a peak because it can't become the permanent level. Your nervous system adjusts. The unusual becomes familiar. Then your mind, slightly offended by its own adaptability, starts looking for the next lift. There is another way to measure pleasure. Not by how high the feeling climbs, but by how much disturbance falls away. Think of the first quiet minute after solving a problem that has followed you all day, or the relief of getting into bed when you're genuinely tired. You don't need fireworks added to the moment. The pleasure is already there in the removal of strain. Hunger ends, fear eases, the unfinished thing is finished. For once, your mind has no urgent complaint to file. This changes the role pleasure plays in a good life. If pleasure means constant stimulation, peace can look empty. A quiet evening seems like nothing happened. A desire that has stopped speaking can feel suspiciously like boredom. We've become so used to being pulled that the absence of pulling barely registers as a positive state. Yet that absence may be the more stable pleasure. It doesn't depend on keeping life at full volume. It doesn't require each day to outperform the last. It can survive ordinary food, familiar company, a walk you've taken before, and a phone that remains face down without causing a small identity crisis. Epicurus gave this settled condition a name, Ataraxia. It means freedom from disturbance, especially the mental agitation that keeps us fearing, chasing, rehearsing, and reaching. This wasn't numbness, and it wasn't withdrawal from life. It was the pleasure of no longer being internally harassed by every desire that happened to knock. Ataraxia begins when pleasure stops meaning more sensation and starts meaning less captivity. Your body can conduct its own hostile takeover. A tooth begins to throb, your back tightens, your stomach turns, and suddenly the room gets smaller. The conversation is still happening. Dinner is still on the table. Someone you love may be telling you something important, but pain keeps pulling your attention back toward itself. Epicurus called freedom from bodily pain aponia. The word can sound almost too modest. If pleasure means excitement, intensity, or delight, then not being in pain seems like a blank space where pleasure ought to be. We rarely celebrate the ordinary afternoon when nothing aches. We notice the body when it complains, then ignore it the moment it becomes quiet again. That quiet is doing more for your life than it gets credit for. Pain doesn't merely add an unpleasant sensation. It can crowd out other sensations, thoughts, and possibilities. When it becomes intense, the world narrows to the next position that might hurt less, the next dose, the next hour, the next chance to lie down. Even mild pain can sit in the background like an alarm that no one can switch off. You can still work, smile, answer messages, and nod at the right moments, while part of your attention remains trapped in negotiations with your own shoulder. It's hard to feel fully present when your body keeps filing the same urgent complaint. So aponia isn't emptiness, it's attention released back into the world. Food has flavor again because pain isn't interrupting every bite. A friend's voice can occupy the whole conversation. You can walk without privately calculating each step. The body becomes less like an emergency and more like the quiet place from which living happens. Epicurus wasn't promising permanent comfort, and he certainly wasn't claiming that every illness or injury could be reasoned away. His point was about how we value bodily ease. We tend to treat it as nothing because nothing dramatic is happening. Then pain arrives and exposes how much freedom that nothing contained. This changes the picture of pleasure. A comfortable chair, enough food, warmth, rest, and a body that isn't demanding immediate rescue may look unimpressive beside luxury or stimulation, but they create the physical room in which friendship, thought, humor, and simple enjoyment become available. Aponia isn't life emptied of feeling. It's life no longer being reduced to the loudest signal the body can send. We make the same mistake in our thinking. If pleasure doesn't arrive with a rush, a notification, a victory, or a story worth telling, we assume it must be a weaker version of the real thing. Calm seems pale beside excitement. Contentment seems almost suspicious. You can sit in a quiet room with nothing chasing you and think, is this it? Part of the problem is that disturbance is loud. Desire creates tension, and satisfying it releases that tension. The stronger the craving, the more dramatic the release can feel. So intensity gets mistaken for value. We remember the relief and call it pleasure, while forgetting the agitation that had to come first. Think of checking your phone after waiting for a message. For 10 minutes, you're restless. You wake the screen, find the reply, and feel a quick lift. That moment is vivid because your mind was wound tight around an absence. But the vividness doesn't prove that this pleasure is better than an evening when you weren't waiting for anyone to confirm your worth. It may simply prove that the disturbance was stronger. This is the useful reversal in Epicurus. A pleasure can feel intense because something has been bothering you. Hunger makes the first bite glorious. Anxiety makes reassurance feel precious. Jealousy makes attention feel intoxicating. The pleasure is real, but its volume partly comes from the discomfort surrounding it. Loud doesn't automatically mean deep. Stable pleasure has less theatre because it doesn't need a crisis to produce contrast. Friendship you trust may feel quieter than winning over someone unpredictable. Having enough may feel duller than chasing more. A mind that isn't rehearsing disaster won't give you the sharp relief of discovering, for the 20th time, that the disaster hasn't happened. There's simply less inner noise to overcome. This can feel like losing something. People sometimes leave a period of chaos and find peace strangely flat. The nervous checking stops. The arguments stop. The reconciliations stop. Nothing surges. And because we've learned to recognize pleasure by its spike, steadiness can look like emotional poverty. But perhaps the smaller feeling isn't a smaller life. Perhaps it's what pleasure feels like when it is no longer competing with fear, craving, and uncertainty for your attention. That still leaves an awkward problem. If we're used to noise, peace may not immediately feel like freedom. It may first feel like boredom. Boredom has a way of making enough feel suspicious. You finish dinner, sit down, and nothing is wrong. Yet within minutes, your hand reaches for the phone. Maybe there's something new to watch, buy, plan, improve, or worry about. The evening has given you no emergency, so desire invents an assignment. We often treat enough as if it were a test of character. A disciplined person should need less. A wise person should be above wanting more. Then enoughness becomes another performance, complete with its own quiet vanity. You're no longer collecting possessions. You're collecting proof that you could live without them. But a boundary isn't a badge. It's simply the place where a demand is allowed to end. That changes the meaning of restraint. You don't stop because wanting is shameful. You stop because this particular want has received what it asked for. Hunger has met food. Tiredness has met rest. A practical need has been answered. Your mind may continue producing suggestions, of course. It's extremely talented at extending business hours. But each new suggestion doesn't automatically inherit the force of a need. Some desires do not honor the boundary. They keep making new requests after the original need is met. Their refusal to stop does not make the boundary unreal. It makes the boundary yours to hold. This is why the boundary is necessary. It lets satisfaction remain satisfaction instead of instantly converting it into appetite. You can improve your life without treating your present life as an embarrassing draft. And sometimes enough will still feel plain. There may be no rush when you close the app, leave the extra purchase, or accept that today's work is finished. No one gives you a medal for not manufacturing one more need. That's useful. Enough isn't there to make you look virtuous. It marks the quiet point where desire loses the right to keep issuing orders. There's an awkward trap waiting on the other side of this. Once you notice how often desire invents problems, simplicity can start to feel morally superior. The empty shelf becomes evidence. The old phone becomes a badge. You stop buying things you don't need, then quietly need other people to notice how little you need. Desire hasn't disappeared. It has changed clothes. Now the proof of a good life is restraint. You want the cleaner room, the smaller wardrobe, the perfectly repaired jacket, the photograph of a table holding one handmade cup. None of those things is wrong. A quiet room can make life easier. Owning less can remove genuine friction. But the moment simplicity has to confirm who you are, it starts making the same old demands. You compare, you curate. You feel uneasy when your life looks ordinary instead of deliberately spare. This is how simple living can become another consumer identity. It still needs objects, images, and rituals to hold the self together. They're just more tasteful. One person proves success with the expensive watch. Another proves wisdom by refusing the watch in a particularly visible way. Both can end up asking the object to settle a question it cannot answer. Am I living correctly? You can hear the shift in the contempt that sometimes follows. People who enjoy fashion become shallow. A crowded home becomes a moral failure. Convenience looks weak. Pleasure becomes suspicious unless it arrives in a plain ceramic bowl. Simplicity stops being useful and becomes a ranking system. That ranking feels especially tempting because it turns a private choice into a stable identity. If you're the disciplined one, the minimalist, the person who has escaped the trap, then every purchase carries more weight than it should. Buying something unnecessary is no longer a small decision. It threatens the character you've built. Refusing it brings relief, but the relief comes from protecting the image. A life with fewer possessions may suit you. So may a life filled with books, tools, clothes, gifts, photographs, and the slightly ridiculous chair you love. The number doesn't settle the matter. The question is whether these things serve your life, or whether your life has been recruited to prove something through them. Simplicity is a tool, not a halo. Use it where it creates room. Leave it alone where it becomes another performance. You don't have to display freedom from desire. The need to display it is desire making one more request. You can know that you have enough and still feel unsafe. The rent is covered. There's food in the kitchen. Your body is warm. Nothing urgent is happening. Yet some part of you keeps looking for the next reassurance. It isn't always greed. Sometimes it's fear trying to build a future in which fear will never be necessary again. That future is expensive because it doesn't exist. No amount of comfort can guarantee that you won't lose money, status, health, love, or control. But fear is a terrible accountant. It doesn't ask whether your needs are met today. It asks whether they could ever go unmet. Since the honest answer is yes, enough begins to feel reckless. This is where the boundary meets its real limit. A safe place to sleep answers a need tonight. It cannot make chance disappear. The wish to be completely protected has no stopping point, because every new defense creates something else to defend. The larger the fortress, the more gates you have to watch. You can see this on an ordinary evening. You've eaten, but keep opening the fridge. You've finished work, but check your email in bed. You have savings, but one bad headline makes the number look embarrassingly small. The action may offer a quick flash of relief. Then the fear returns with updated figures. So enoughness isn't just a matter of drawing a sensible boundary. You also have to tolerate the fact that a boundary can't keep life under control. Your meal ends hunger. It can't insure your body against every illness. Friendship eases loneliness. It can't promise that nobody will leave. Money solves many real problems. It can't negotiate an exemption from uncertainty. That can sound bleak until you notice the alternative. If you demand certainty before allowing yourself to feel secure, security is postponed forever. Fear will always find one more scenario, one more precaution, one more reason not to unclench. The limit, then, isn't proof that nothing bad can happen. It's the point where this moment no longer requires more. Seeing that point is important. But if fear still treats uncertainty as an emergency, seeing enough won't help you feel it. The unresolved problem is no longer how much you need. It's what you believe must happen before you're allowed to be at peace. You can see this in the small ways we arrange a day. You choose the familiar route even when it takes longer. You stay in a job you complain about because at least you know how it disappoints you. You keep the evening carefully occupied so there's no loose hour in which an uncomfortable thought might appear. None of this looks like panic. It looks sensible. That's why it's so easy to miss. When your mind feels threatened, comfort can become armor. The familiar meal, the fixed routine, the same opinions, the same people, the same private rules about how life is supposed to go, all of it can create a protective shell around uncertainty. Inside that shell, life feels more manageable, fewer surprises, fewer chances to be embarrassed, rejected, exposed, or changed. Comfort itself isn't the problem. Rest is important. Stability is important. A home you can return to, work you understand, people you trust. These are genuine goods. The shift happens when comfort stops helping you recover and starts helping you avoid. You're no longer resting so you can meet life again. You're arranging life so it can't reach you. Then even ordinary change begins to feel like a threat. A cancelled plan irritates you more than it should. A new responsibility feels invasive. Someone questions an assumption, and you defend it as if they've entered your house without knocking. The reaction seems to be about the event. Often, it's about the crack the event has made in your protection. This is why fear can make a comfortable life feel strangely tense. Armor is heavy. It needs constant maintenance. You have to preserve the routine, control the variables, avoid certain conversations, and keep your identity from being tested. The safer your world becomes, the more alarming anything outside it can seem. We sometimes call this being careful, realistic, or simply knowing what we like. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes I like things this way means I don't trust myself if things change. That distinction is important because one is preference. The other is fear wearing your clothes. And armor doesn't only keep danger out. It dulls contact with everything. Surprise, intimacy, ambition, grief, joy, all of them involve being affected by something you cannot fully control. If your first loyalty is to remaining untouched, you may protect yourself from pain while also becoming unavailable to your own life. The diagnosis is uncomfortable but clean. You may not be chasing comfort because life feels good there. You may be clinging to it because uncertainty feels like an attack. Uncertainty feels even harsher when you believe someone is watching from behind it. A delayed answer, a failed harvest, an illness, a sudden loss. Any of these can start to look like a verdict. You don't merely suffer the event, you search it for blame. What did I do? Who have I offended? What punishment is coming next? For Epicurus, fear of the gods placed your mind beneath a permanent unseen threat. The gods of popular religion could seem powerful, easily angered, and deeply interested in human conduct. Their judgment might arrive through disaster now, or punishment after death. There was no reliable moment when you could say the danger had passed. Even good fortune could feel temporary, because an invisible will might reverse it without warning. Epicurus tried to remove that ceiling. He didn't ask his followers to settle every question about whether gods existed. His practical claim was narrower. A blessed and indestructible being would not spend eternity monitoring human mistakes, losing its temper, and arranging penalties. Those are troubled human habits enlarged to cosmic size. A divine life, if it is truly divine, would be peaceful. It wouldn't need revenge. That argument changes the emotional weight of ordinary suffering. Misfortune can still hurt. Death can still take someone you love. A storm can still destroy the work of years. But the event no longer has to carry a secret accusation. Pain is painful enough without turning it into evidence that the universe has marked you for punishment. Most of us don't live in Epicurus's religious world. Still, we know the pressure of hidden judgment. You send a message and watch the silence beneath it. You make one bad decision and begin treating every later setback as proof that you're being repaid. You imagine life keeping a private account, with your failures carefully entered and a bill waiting somewhere out of sight. That modern feeling isn't identical to ancient fear of the gods, and Epicurus shouldn't be recruited to explain every form of guilt or anxiety. His point is more precise. When your mind assumes an unseen judge, uncertainty becomes morally charged. Chance starts to look personal. Suffering starts to look deserved. You can spend years defending yourself before a court that never appears. Epicurus offers a calmer reading. Not every blow is a sentence. Not every silence is condemnation. And not every loss contains a message about your worth. Remove the imagined judge, and the event may remain difficult, but it becomes an event again, rather than a punishment written in code. Once the imagined judge is gone, another fear remains. You can stop reading punishment into every loss and still lie awake at night because one loss is unavoidable. Your life will end, the people you love will end, and your mind, faced with that fact, becomes remarkably talented at reaching for snacks. Sometimes the reach is literal. Another drink, another purchase, another episode playing in a room you meant to leave an hour ago. Sometimes it looks more respectable. Status, praise, money, a packed calendar, the small relief of seeing your name attached to something successful. None of these things is automatically foolish. Epicurus wasn't suspicious of pleasure. He thought pleasure mattered, but pleasure becomes unstable when we ask it to answer fear. That's because reassurance wears off. The meal ends, the message arrives, gives you a warm pulse of relief, and becomes old news by morning. The promotion feels solid until someone else rises faster. You can enjoy these things when they're simply good things, but when they're secretly being used as evidence that you're safe, significant, or somehow exempt from disappearance, they acquire an impossible job. Then appetite changes. You're no longer eating because the food tastes good. You're asking the next bite to quiet something it cannot reach. You're no longer checking your phone because someone might have written. You're checking whether the world still remembers you. The object may be ordinary, even pleasant. The demand behind it is enormous. This helps explain why abundance can feel strangely thin. More pleasure doesn't settle us if each pleasure must keep proving that life is secure. It can even sharpen the unease. Every peak fades, and every fading feels like a tiny rehearsal for the larger ending we don't want to face. So we reach again, not always from greed, but from fear, wearing the clothes of desire. Epicurus makes an awkward distinction here, one our habits resist. Enjoyment and reassurance aren't the same thing. Enjoyment can complete itself. Reassurance needs renewal. One lets the evening be enough, the other keeps glancing at the clock, worried that enough is already slipping away. Removing divine fear, then, doesn't finish the work. It clears the room so we can see what else has been moving the furniture. Beneath the appetite for one more comfort sits a more basic terror, that death will take everything, and that perhaps we can soften the fact by consuming enough life before it does. Epicurus now has to meet that fear directly, because until mortality changes shape in your thinking, pleasure will keep being asked to perform a rescue it cannot deliver. You can feel this pressure in an ordinary Saturday. The weather is good. You have nowhere urgent to be. There's coffee, music, maybe someone you love nearby. Yet part of you is already measuring the day against all the days you won't have. Shouldn't you be traveling, making memories, becoming someone? A quiet afternoon starts to feel less like a pleasure and more like a missed opportunity. Mortality can turn enjoyment into evidence. The meal must prove you lived well. The holiday must prove you didn't waste the year. The relationship must be intense enough, the achievement visible enough, the story worth telling. Pleasure is no longer allowed to arrive, satisfy you, and pass. It has to testify on your behalf. I was here. I used my time. I didn't let life escape untouched. That demand makes even good experiences strangely exhausting. You take a photograph before you've really seen the view. You plan the next trip while sitting in the hotel you wanted so badly to reach. At dinner, you wonder whether another restaurant would have been better. Nothing is simply happening. Everything is being entered into an invisible account, as though death might inspect the records and grant extra credit for enthusiasm. Of course, knowing life is limited can sharpen attention. A deadline can rescue us from endless delay. But the same knowledge can also make every choice feel accused by the lives we didn't choose. If you stay home, you should have gone out. If you rest, you should have built something. If you commit to one person, one place, or one path, thousands of unlived possibilities seem to gather at the door. This is how scarcity changes desire. We don't merely want the pleasure in front of us. We want it to compensate for every pleasure time will deny us. No evening can do that. No romance, purchase, promotion, or adventure can contain all the lives you might have lived. Ask one experience to defeat that loss, and it will feel insufficient before it even begins. Then urgency becomes a habit. You rush toward pleasure, rush through it, and leave disappointed that it didn't make you feel less mortal. The clock wins twice, first by limiting the time, then by entering the experience and spoiling it. A life can be crowded with pleasures and still feel unused, because the pressure was never really asking for pleasure. It was asking for proof against disappearance, and the more proof we demand, the less able we are to inhabit the only life that can actually be lived. This particular one, passing now. You can feel that pressure in a very ordinary moment. The room is quiet. Nothing is wrong. Then your mind reaches past the evening, past the years ahead, and tries to imagine your own absence. It can't quite do it, so it supplies a picture instead. Darkness, silence, an endless empty place where you somehow remain, trapped with the knowledge that life is over. Epicurus thought this picture was misleading. Every experience requires someone who is there to have it. Pleasure needs a living body, pain does too. So do darkness, loneliness, boredom, and regret. If death is the end of experience, then being dead cannot feel like an endless deprivation. There is no stranded version of you left behind to endure it. That doesn't make the thought easy. We're used to imagining every event from inside our own awareness. We picture our funeral almost as if we were standing at the back, watching people arrive. We imagine the world continuing without us, then quietly place ourselves inside that future as the person excluded from it. Your mind performs a useful little absurdity. It attends its own absence. Epicurus asks us to separate two things we often collapse. A bad experience can harm you because you undergo it. Non-experience isn't an experience with all the good parts removed. It has no duration for you, no waiting, no awareness of what you're missing. You won't spend eternity wishing you had one more morning. Wishing belongs to the living. This argument is precise, and its precision counts. It addresses the fear of being dead. It doesn't erase every fear connected with dying. You may reasonably fear pain, dependence, unfinished responsibilities, or what your death will do to people you love. You may grieve someone because their absence changes the shape of your days. None of that is disproved by saying the dead do not suffer their own non-existence. It also doesn't tell you to become indifferent to life. If anything, it removes one imagined torment from the far side of life, so you can look more honestly at the concerns that remain on this side. Some can be prepared for, some can be spoken about, some losses cannot be made harmless at all. Epicurus offers no promise that mortality will stop hurting. His narrower claim is that we should not add a fictional sufferer to death, a conscious self imprisoned forever in the fact of no longer being conscious. Fear may still gather around the process, the separation and the loss, but the state of being dead is not another difficult experience waiting for you. A clear argument can settle something in your mind while the rest of you carries on as before. You understand that death isn't an experience waiting to trap you, then find yourself checking your bank balance again, refreshing a message, or reaching for some small pleasure with the urgency of someone securing a bunker. That isn't hypocrisy. Old desires don't vanish the moment an idea exposes them. They've been trained by repetition, fear, praise, comparison, and a brief relief that comes when we get what we wanted. Your mind can change its judgment in an afternoon. A habit may keep making the same demand for years. This is where the fear of death returns in disguise. We rarely walk around thinking about non-existence directly. More often, we chase proof that our life is protected from loss. More money, more admiration, more control, more experiences squeezed into the calendar. Each promise is slightly different, but the bargain underneath is familiar. If I can gather enough, perhaps nothing important can be taken from me. Pleasure then becomes a form of security. The expensive meal isn't only delicious, it proves that life is going well. Attention isn't only pleasant, it proves that we matter. Success isn't only useful, it seems to build a wall between us and insignificance. We ask temporary things to give us permanent reassurance, which is an awkward job for a dinner reservation or a number on a screen. Epicurus doesn't condemn pleasure. He asks us to notice when pleasure has been recruited into an impossible task. A desire becomes disturbing when satisfying it doesn't bring rest, only a more demanding version of itself. You get the thing, feel safe for an hour, and then need another sign. The chase survives every arrival. An argument can interrupt that pattern long before it can erase it. It gives you a moment of recognition. This purchase, achievement, or approval may be enjoyable, but it cannot make life untouchable. That small distinction counts in ordinary life. You can still want the pleasure without treating it as evidence that you've defeated uncertainty. And once pleasure no longer has to protect you from mortality, another problem comes into view. Some desires end in satisfaction. Others grow precisely because we keep feeding them. To live with less disturbance, we have to learn which kind we're dealing with. Knowing that choices have consequences is easy. Caring for the person who inherits them is harder. The future can feel distant enough that tonight's desire gets the only vote. Epicurus gave this problem a central place in a pleasant life. He called the answer prudence, the practical ability to consider what a choice is likely to bring with it. Prudence does not reopen the case against pleasure. It asks how enjoyment can belong to your life without one moment abandoning the rest of it. Your present self is no longer the only person in the room. The tired version of you tomorrow is here too. So is the calmer version next month, and the older version who must live inside the habits being built tonight. Prudence lets these versions of you choose together. This is not a demand to predict everything or assign numbers to regret, ease, dread, and self-respect. Often you will not know exactly what follows. The point is simpler. A feeling is not more important merely because it arrived first. Widen the moment by one honest step. Before reaching for relief, ask what it is likely to leave behind. Before escaping discomfort, ask whether that discomfort is carrying you towards steadiness. Sometimes care for the future still says yes. Eat the dessert, cancel the plan, stay up with a friend who needs you. Prudence protects spontaneity by keeping one pleasure from turning against the life around it. This can sound colder than it is. The moment we bring judgment into pleasure, we imagine someone standing beside the cake with a clipboard. Every delight must defend itself. Every lazy afternoon needs a business case. You can almost hear the joy leaving the room. But prudence isn't suspicion aimed at happiness. It's affection stretched across time. It lets the person you'll be tomorrow sit at the same table as the person you are tonight. Neither one gets complete control. Both get treated like someone worth caring for. That changes the tone of self-discipline. You're not punishing the present because the future is morally superior. You're trying to avoid creating a private arrangement in which one version of you gets all the comfort and another does all the cleaning. We know that arrangement well. It appears in the extra drink that makes tomorrow anxious, the purchase that turns next week tight, the hour of scrolling that leaves bedtime strangely empty. None of these pleasures is evil. That's too dramatic. They simply become less kind when oneself enjoys them by quietly abandoning another. And kindness is important because harsh judgment has its own appetite. We can become so frightened of regret that we refuse ordinary delight. We decline the meal, leave the gathering early, turn rest into guilt and call the result discipline. Yet a life organized entirely around avoiding future discomfort is still organized by fear. Epicurean prudence has more warmth than that. It asks you to choose pleasures well enough that you don't need to become their enemy. Sometimes care for your future self means stopping. Sometimes it means allowing the pleasure without conducting a trial in your head. Take the walk with no productivity attached. Order the thing you genuinely enjoy. Laugh too loudly. Stay under the blanket on a wet morning when nothing urgent is being neglected. A joy that fits inside your life doesn't need an apology. Warm judgment is the ability to hold pleasure without either worshipping it or shaming it. You can enjoy what is here and remain loyal to the person who wakes up afterward. That loyalty makes pleasure safer, but it also makes pleasure fuller. You're no longer stealing it from yourself. And once prudence feels like care rather than control, another limit comes into view. No future self becomes secure alone. Many status-shaped desires are attempts to feel protected or seen, but public proof cannot offer the safety that mutual care can. The question now is how friendship can make a life more secure without turning other people into servants of our peace. You can make your home quiet, keep your needs modest, and refuse most of the contests that exhaust people. Then your phone lights up at midnight with a message from someone you love, and the calm suddenly feels very thin. Their trouble enters the room, so does your fear of losing them. A peaceful life can reduce noise, but it cannot seal you off from being human. We often imagine security as a private achievement. Enough money, enough control over our time, a place where nobody can interfere. The fantasy is understandable because other people are unpredictable. They disappoint us, misunderstand us, need us at inconvenient hours, and occasionally send a 3-minute voice note that should have been 2 sentences. Solitude can spare us some of that friction. It cannot give us the safety we were hoping to find. Fear grows easily in isolation. A small worry has no resistance there. It circles, gathers authority, and begins speaking in your own voice. You can tell yourself that everything is fine, but self-reassurance has limits. Sometimes peace arrives because another person knows what frightens you and stays. They don't solve the future. They make the future less lonely to face. This is why Epicurus placed friendship inside the good life, rather than treating it as a pleasant extra. Friendship answered a basic vulnerability. We need people whose presence weakens the sense that every danger must be carried alone. A trusted friend may offer help, but even before help comes, there is relief in knowing that your life exists in someone else's care. That changes the meaning of independence. You still learn to live without constant approval. You still avoid making another person responsible for your inner weather. But freedom doesn't require emotional exile. If your peace depends on never being needed, interrupted, hurt, or known, it isn't peace. It's a private room with a nervous lock. Of course, friendship creates new fears. Anyone you care about can leave, change, suffer, or die. Love gives fortune another place to touch you. Yet refusing that risk does not produce a stronger life, it produces a smaller one, guarded from loss by being guarded from belonging. So the peaceful life cannot be built only from what you keep out. It also depends on whom you let in. The friend at your table, the familiar name on the screen, the person who can hear the strain beneath "I'm fine." These aren't disturbances around the good life. They are part of its shelter. Shelter sounds sentimental until something actually goes wrong. Your car dies on an unfamiliar road. A landlord raises the rent. You lose work, get bad news, or sit awake at 2 a.m. because your mind has turned one mistake into a complete forecast of your future. In moments like these, fear grows by quietly adding one thought: I am alone with this. A friend changes the calculation. They may not repair the car, replace the income, or make the news less painful. They do something more basic. They make the problem shared. There is someone to call, somewhere to go, another mind that can look at the same mess without being trapped inside your panic. The facts may remain difficult, but your position inside them is different. You are no longer facing fortune as a single, exposed point. Epicurus understood friendship in this practical sense. He didn't treat it as decoration for a pleasant life, something to enjoy after food, safety, and comfort had already been secured. Friendship was itself a form of security, not because friends can prevent every loss, but because they reduce how defenseless we feel before loss arrives. That feeling carries more weight than we admit. When life seems defenseless, we try to build protection out of unstable things. More money, more status, more approval, more control. Each one offers a brief sense that we're becoming untouchable. Then the standard moves. There's always another number, another person to impress, another threat to anticipate. We keep feeding pleasures that promise safety but require constant maintenance. Friendship works differently. Its value isn't that it makes you impressive. It makes some forms of impressiveness less necessary. When people know you without the performance, approval loses some of its grip. When help can move both ways, money is no longer your only defense against trouble. When someone will tell you the truth, your own frightened thoughts lose their monopoly on the story. This is why friendship can lower disturbance even while making us vulnerable. It gives fear fewer empty rooms to echo through. The late-night message, the spare key, the meal brought over without ceremony, the friend who says, "No, you're not imagining it, but you're also not finished." These ordinary acts alter what danger means. Trouble is still trouble. It just no longer means total exposure. A secure life, then, isn't one where nothing can reach you. It's one where, when life does reach you, it doesn't find you standing there alone. But friendship does more than make the bad days survivable. It also changes what counts as a good day. Think of an evening that, on paper, achieves nothing. You sit at a cheap table, someone tells a story you've heard before, and gets one detail wrong. The food is ordinary. Nobody is improving their status, building a legacy, or becoming more efficient. Yet, when you walk home, life feels fuller than it did 2 hours earlier. Nothing was added to your possessions. Something was added to your experience. We often treat friends as valuable because they help us get other things: advice, introductions, comfort, company, a lift to the airport at an indecent hour, all useful. But if usefulness were the whole point, the perfect friend would be a highly responsive service with access to a car. Clearly, that misses almost everything. Epicurus treated friendship as one of life's great pleasures, because the relationship isn't merely a tool for reaching a pleasant life. It is part of that life. The shared joke, the familiar voice, the freedom to be unpolished in front of another person, these aren't payments towards some future happiness. They are forms of happiness happening now. That counts because ambition trains us to postpone pleasure. We tell ourselves that peace will arrive after the promotion, the move, the better body, the larger bank balance. Friendship quietly ruins this arrangement. A friend can make an unimpressive Tuesday feel complete. They remind you that a life doesn't have to look important from the outside to feel worth inhabiting. And this pleasure has an unusual shape. It can't be fully owned or consumed alone. You participate in it. You listen, answer, remember, forgive, show up late, stay longer than planned. The good is created between people, which means it resists the fantasy that a satisfying life can be built through private achievement alone. This is why losing touch can feel strange even when everything else is going well. Your career may be moving, your home may be comfortable, your calendar may be full. Still, the week can feel oddly thin because some pleasures only exist when they're shared with someone who knows why the story counts. So the Epicurean garden wasn't simply a safe place filled with helpful allies. It was a place where the good life was already being lived in conversation, meals, laughter, and time freely given. That leaves us with one unresolved problem. If pleasure belongs in a wise life, how do we enjoy it without becoming dependent on getting more and more? We often confuse independence with being untouched. You tell yourself you'll be fine if plans fall through, if someone leaves, if nobody calls. It can sound strong. Sometimes it is strong. But sometimes you're just trying to arrange your life so that no other person can disappoint you. That isn't self-sufficiency. It's fear with a very tidy calendar. For Epicurus, being self-sufficient didn't mean becoming a sealed human unit. It meant learning not to hand your peace over to demands another person could never finish satisfying. You can be surrounded by people and still feel desperate when every look, reply, and silence must prove that you matter. The correction is small, but it changes everything. You can need relationships in the ordinary human sense without making another person responsible for holding your whole life together. You can love someone deeply without requiring them to erase every doubt. You can miss them without treating their absence as proof that you've become nothing. You can accept help without turning helplessness into your identity. This kind of self-sufficiency is less like building a wall and more like standing on your own feet while remaining close enough to hold someone's hand. The connection is real, so is your footing. You notice the difference in awkward little moments. A message goes unanswered for a few hours. Someone you care about has a life that doesn't orbit yours. A dinner is cancelled. If your peace depends on constant confirmation, each gap becomes a verdict. You start reading silence like a hostile document. But if you already have some inner sense of enough, disappointment can remain disappointment. It doesn't have to become abandonment, humiliation, or a full trial of your worth. That doesn't make you cold. It makes affection less frightened. You don't have to grip every pleasure until it stops feeling pleasant. You can receive attention without demanding an endless supply. You can enjoy company without using company to escape yourself. And when solitude arrives, as it always does, you don't have to pretend you prefer it merely to save face. Epicurean self-sufficiency isn't freedom from needing anyone. Human beings don't become wise by becoming emotionally waterproof. It is freedom from the kind of dependence that turns love into panic, approval into oxygen, and every absence into a threat. Enough doesn't mean alone. It means you can belong to others without disappearing into them. Dependence often hides inside things that look perfectly normal. You check whether they replied. You notice who was invited. One small signal changes your whole evening because it has become evidence that you are allowed to feel secure in the relationship. Then confidence is rented from other people. Their attention must keep renewing it. The problem here is no longer the old contest for more praise or status. It is what that contest does to closeness. You stop meeting another person as they are and start reading them for proof that you still matter. Freedom from dependence, then, doesn't mean refusing praise or pretending achievement is meaningless. That performance becomes its own little vanity. You can enjoy being respected. You can work hard, accept recognition, and feel pleased when someone sees what you've done. The distinction is whether those things add pleasure to your life or hold your life hostage. You can usually tell by what happens when reassurance disappears. A quiet phone becomes an accusation. A mild criticism ruins 10 sincere compliments. You aren't simply responding to another person anymore. You're asking them to deliver a verdict on you. A freer person still has preferences. They'd rather be welcomed than ignored, trusted than doubted, successful than embarrassed. But they don't confuse preference with necessity. They can lose the room without losing themselves. External proof may decorate a life. It becomes dependence when you hand it the keys. When you stop asking other people to settle your worth, something surprising happens. You don't care less about them. You can finally care about them without panic. Panic makes care noisy. It watches every pause, every change of tone, every delayed reply. It turns another person's bad mood into a possible emergency. Then affection becomes mixed with surveillance. You are no longer only listening to what they feel. Part of you is checking what their feelings might mean about you. That's exhausting for both people. The person you love can't simply be tired, distracted, uncertain, or quiet. Their inner life starts to feel like weather you must control. You rush to fix what may not need fixing. You press for reassurance when they need space. You make promises too quickly because tension feels unbearable. None of this means your care is fake. It means fear has climbed into the driver's seat. Epicurean steadiness offers a cleaner kind of closeness. Epicurus didn't treat friendship as a decorative extra. He saw it as one of life's great sources of safety and pleasure. But friendship becomes safer when neither person has to perform constant emotional rescue. You can sit beside someone's sadness without treating it as evidence that you've failed. You can hear disappointment without collapsing into defense. You can let a difficult conversation remain difficult for 10 minutes, instead of forcing it toward a cheerful ending because your body wants relief. Steadiness gives another person room to be real. It also changes generosity. You help because help is needed, not because being needed gives you a temporary identity. You say yes with warmth and no without turning cold. You can offer attention without secretly writing an invoice for attention in return. Care stops being a bargain conducted under the table. This isn't emotional flatness. You may still worry when someone is hurting. You may still feel the sting of distance, the relief of reconciliation, the ache of watching a friend choose badly. The difference is that feeling no longer has to become frenzy. Love can move through you without knocking over all the furniture. A steadier person is often easier to trust for exactly this reason. They don't disappear when things become uncomfortable, and they don't make every discomfort about themselves. They can stay close without gripping. But even clean care meets a limit. Other people remain free to misunderstand you, leave you, or suffer in ways you cannot prevent. Once friendship is no longer being used to secure the self, we're left with the harder task, loving what we cannot control. And this is where the undisturbed life begins to sound suspiciously small. If peace depends on wanting less, avoiding needless conflict, and accepting what you can't control, are we describing wisdom or a very elegant retreat? The objection deserves more than a quick dismissal. There are lives that should be disturbed. A cruel law, a threatened friend, a talent left unused, a promise that costs you sleep. These aren't always irrational intrusions into an otherwise peaceful afternoon. Sometimes discomfort is the price of answering to something beyond your own state of mind. You can feel the pressure in ordinary choices. You're offered meaningful work, but it will consume more of you. Someone you love needs care that won't fit neatly into your week. You see a wrong you could challenge, knowing the challenge may bring anger, embarrassment, or loss. In those moments, calm can look less like freedom and more like a reason to remain untouched. That possibility lives inside Epicurean thought itself. If disturbance is treated as the main danger, then ambition, duty, public action, and demanding forms of love can all begin to look like bad bargains. The safest life becomes the easiest one to defend. A small circle, modest needs, few risks, no dependence on applause. There is dignity in that picture. There may also be a ceiling. Most of us don't only want relief from pain, we want to become capable of something. We want to build, protect, repair, create, and sometimes stand where standing is costly. A philosophy that teaches us how not to be ruled by fear is useful. A philosophy that quietly trains us to avoid every situation where fear might arise would be doing something else. The difficulty is that retreat can borrow the language of wisdom. We can call fear simplicity. We can call resignation acceptance. We can reduce our hopes until disappointment becomes unlikely, then congratulate ourselves for being impossible to wound. From the inside, that may feel peaceful. From the outside, it may look like a life arranged to prevent reality from asking too much. So the Smallness Charge isn't based on misunderstanding Epicurean peace. It appears because the doctrine takes peace seriously. Once freedom from disturbance becomes a central measure of the good life, we have to ask what happens when goodness itself is disturbing, when loyalty, courage, justice, or creation demands that we surrender the very calm we've learned to protect. This is where the objection earns its place. It doesn't prove that peace is empty, cowardly, or dull. Most of us know what needless torment feels like. Your mind rehearses an insult at 2 a.m. We treat every delay as a threat, every desire as an emergency, every uncertain future as a personal attack. Freedom from that isn't a small achievement. It gives you your life back. The problem begins when that freedom becomes the whole standard for a rich life. A quiet mind can help you love well, work carefully, and face difficulty without adding panic. But quietness alone can't tell you which difficulties deserve to be faced. It can't decide whether to speak when silence would be easier, whether to remain loyal when leaving would restore your comfort, or whether an ambition is vanity or a genuine use of your abilities. Peace is good at removing noise. It is less reliable as a compass. And you can see the difference in ordinary choices. Suppose a friend is suffering and needs more from you than one reassuring message. The evening you meant to protect is gone. The conversation may be awkward. You may leave carrying worries that weren't yours before. If peace is freedom from needless disturbance, there's no conflict here. The inconvenience serves love. But if peace has quietly become the highest proof that you're living well, your friend starts to look like a threat to your balance. The same thing happens with work worth doing. Writing a book, raising a child, challenging an unfair decision, learning to make something difficult. These can fill a life with frustration, doubt, and unfinished business. Some pain comes from confused desire and can be released. Some comes with caring about anything that can fail. Remove all of it, and you haven't perfected the experience. You may have removed the stake. So the serious limit isn't that Epicurean calm leaves us with nothing. It leaves us with something precious but incomplete. We need relief from fears that consume life without serving it. We also need some account of what is worth losing sleep for, what deserves sacrifice, and which forms of disturbance are the price of being fully involved. A philosophy of peace can teach us not to suffer twice, once from the difficulty, and again from the terror we build around it. That is real freedom. It becomes a smaller vision only when we ask it to settle every question about richness, duty, love, and courage. Peace may clear the ground for a good life. It cannot, by itself, decide what we should build there. You can see this in the small decisions that become strangely difficult when your mind is never at rest. You agree to things just to end the discomfort. You avoid a conversation because you can't bear another tense hour. You chase whatever gives immediate relief, then call the result a choice. A life full of options can still feel controlled from the outside when fear, craving, and agitation are doing the choosing for you. This gives Epicurean peace a stronger role than mere comfort. Stable pleasure doesn't have to be the complete destination of life. It can be the first condition that makes a deliberate life possible. When pain and panic stop issuing constant orders, you can finally hear your own judgment. You can decide what deserves your time, instead of simply reacting to whatever disturbs you most. That distinction is important. We often treat peace as a prize we'll collect after every meaningful task is finished. Once the work is secure, the family is safe, the future is settled, and nobody expects anything difficult from us, then we'll permit ourselves to breathe. Of course, that day never arrives. Life keeps moving the furniture. There is always another message, another uncertainty, another reason to postpone being present. Epicurus reverses the order. A measure of peace comes first, not because life has been exhausted or solved, but because a frightened and endlessly hungry mind is a poor judge of what a good life requires. Calm creates room between an impulse and an answer. In that room, you may still choose effort, discomfort, responsibility, or change, but now the choice belongs more fully to you. So peace needn't mean withdrawing from life. It can mean refusing to let every disturbance become your master. You eat without turning appetite into a command. You rest without treating rest as failure. You face uncertainty without inventing 10 extra disasters before breakfast. None of this tells you exactly what to value. It gives you a steadier place from which to value anything at all. And that may be the fairest way to keep Epicurus, not as the final authority on everything a human life can become, but as the philosopher who helps us become available for that decision. Once peace is understood as a condition for choosing, the argument changes. We no longer need to ask whether calm is enough for an entire life. We need to ask what kind of freedom begins when unnecessary fear no longer chooses for us. That freedom is easy to misread. The moment fear loosens its grip, we may rush to fill the space with whatever feels good. More pleasure, better food, another trip, a softer bed, a fuller calendar, a life arranged so beautifully that discomfort seems like a design mistake. If peace helps us choose, does freedom simply mean becoming more skillful at satisfying ourselves? No. Indulgence still lets appetite write the rules. It may look relaxed, even refined, but the basic relation hasn't changed. You want, so you obey. Then the pleasure fades, the standard rises, and yesterday's luxury becomes today's minimum. A person can own very little and be ruled by desire. A person can own everything and be ruled by the fear of losing it. Freedom can't be measured by how pleasant we've made the room. The opposite answer is just as tempting. If desire can rule us, perhaps we should punish it. Sleep on the floor, refuse comfort, turn every ordinary pleasure into a moral weakness. Austerity can create impressive discipline, but discipline becomes another kind of dependence when you need hardship to prove that you're strong. Then the cold shower, the empty plate, or the brutal schedule stops being a choice. It becomes a witness you keep calling to testify on your behalf, which is an exhausting way to conduct a trial no one else requested. And there is a quieter mistake, one that looks almost perfect from the outside. You build a calm routine. You protect your mornings. You breathe slowly, keep the room tidy, avoid difficult people, and become very good at feeling undisturbed. This can help, but wellness calm becomes a trap when peace depends on life remaining cooperative. One delayed train, one ugly conversation, one diagnosis, one person who refuses to behave, and the whole arrangement reveals its price. Indulgence fails because pleasure can command us. Austerity fails because pain can become a performance. Protected calm fails because the world won't stay protected. Each one confuses a condition with a life. Pleasure with freedom, hardship with character, serenity with wisdom. None can tell us what deserves the freedom we've gained. Strip those answers away, and the choice becomes less decorative. When you aren't obeying appetite, proving yourself through deprivation, or hiding inside a carefully managed peace, what do you do with the freedom that remains? Not what comforts you, not what displays control. What is actually worth choosing? You can test that choice in places so ordinary they barely look philosophical. Open the fridge when you aren't hungry. Reach for your phone during 10 quiet seconds. Stop working while one task remains unfinished. The object changes, but the disturbance has the same shape. Something makes a demand, and obedience feels like relief. They all lead to one practical question. Does this pleasure support your life, or does your life keep shrinking to protect it? Food, money, respect, friendship, and rest can all belong to a good life. None has to become the condition on which your whole peace depends. Friendship carries a special boundary because needing people is not a flaw. The aim is to love them without making them employees of your emotional weather. A life less disturbed is not a life with less in it. It is a life in which more things can be enjoyed without being placed in charge. The next test won't arrive in a philosophy book. It'll arrive as something small and completely reasonable. A better phone, one more drink, a reply from someone whose attention still has too much power over you. Another hour of work because stopping now would make you feel strangely exposed. When it comes, you don't need to decide what kind of person you are. You don't need to call yourself disciplined, detached, ambitious, weak, enlightened, or anything else. Labels have a way of turning one choice into a performance. Then you're no longer looking honestly at the want. You're protecting a story about yourself. A question is lighter. It leaves room to notice what's actually happening. If I don't get this, what happens inside me? Stay with the first answer. Maybe you'll be disappointed for 10 minutes. Fine. Disappointment isn't a warning sign. You can want something, miss it, and remain perfectly free. But perhaps the thought of going without it makes the whole day feel spoiled. Perhaps you start bargaining, refreshing, spending, chasing, or quietly blaming the person who stood between you and relief. The wanting has become more than a preference. It has acquired control. That doesn't make the pleasure corrupt. It tells you about the relationship. You can still buy the phone, pour the drink, send the message, accept the praise, take the promotion. The test isn't whether you refuse every good thing. It's whether the good thing must cooperate before you can be at peace. And you won't answer that once. Life is annoyingly inventive. The thing you hold lightly today may become tomorrow's private emergency. The thing that once controlled you may lose its grip so completely that you can enjoy it again. There's no permanent badge for getting this right. There is only the next encounter and the honesty you bring to it. That's useful, because identity is heavy. If you decide you're a person who has conquered desire, every new want becomes an embarrassment. You'll hide it, rename it, or pretend it doesn't matter. A question asks for less theatre. It lets you admit, yes, I want this, and then look at the wanting without kneeling to it. Soon enough, something ordinary will catch your eye. You'll imagine how good it would feel to have it, hear it, taste it, win it, or be chosen for it. Before your mind builds a case and calls it necessity, ask one clean question. Can I enjoy this without handing it the keys? Tomorrow you'll want something ordinary. A better breakfast. A reply from someone. 10 quiet minutes before the day begins. Maybe you'll reach for your phone before your feet touch the floor, and for a moment the whole machinery of wanting will start again. There's nothing shameful in that. Wanting is part of being alive. The trouble begins when every pleasure leaves behind a new instruction. Do it again. Get more. Don't lose this. Don't let anyone else get ahead. Some pleasures end when they give you what you needed. Hunger passes. Thirst eases. A good conversation leaves you less alone. Rest returns you to yourself. Other pleasures arrive with paperwork. You get the thing, then inherit the fear of losing it, the effort of displaying it, or the need for a stronger version next time. The pleasure was real, so was the dependence it created. Epicurus asks us to notice that difference. He doesn't ask us to become suspicious of every enjoyable thing. He asks whether a pleasure quiets the disturbance that produced the desire, or keeps the disturbance alive under a more attractive name. And that can sound almost too simple. Life isn't a quiet garden. You may have children to support, work that demands ambition, people who depend on your effort, and problems that won't disappear because you've learned to enjoy bread and friendship. Some desires are tangled with duty, some risks are worth taking. Sometimes peace is unavailable, and pretending otherwise would turn philosophy into a comfortable excuse. Epicurus doesn't solve that objection for us. He can't tell you, from centuries away, which ambition belongs to your character and which one was planted there by comparison. He can't decide when a difficult pursuit is meaningful, or when it has become a machine that eats every hour you give it. No rule can make those choices painless. But you can watch what happens after the reward. Notice the purchase that pleases you for an afternoon and occupies your mind for a week. Notice the praise that feels warm until someone else receives more. Notice the goal that makes sacrifice feel worthwhile, and the goal that keeps moving because arriving would leave you alone with yourself. The useful evidence often appears after the excitement is gone. This doesn't divide life neatly into simple pleasures that are good and complicated pleasures that are bad. A costly meal can deepen a friendship. A plain routine can become another form of control. The object doesn't settle the matter. Your relationship to it does. The practical change is modest. Before obeying every want, give it a little room. Ask what discomfort it promises to end, what it will require afterward, and whether satisfaction will let you rest. You won't always choose perfectly. You'll still buy things you don't need, chase approval, confuse urgency with importance, and discover that one more episode was not, in fact, a spiritual necessity. That's all right. Philosophy is allowed to meet us as we are. The aim isn't to empty your life of desire. It's to become less easily commanded by desires that cannot finish. Then pleasure can return to its proper size. A meal can be a meal. Success can be enjoyed without becoming your identity. Solitude can stop feeling like proof that something is wrong. Enough can become a condition you recognize, even if you can't live there all the time. And tomorrow, when the next ordinary want appears, you don't have to crush it or worship it. You can simply notice where it leads. Some pleasures open the hand, others tighten it. Peace may begin with learning the difference